Welcome back to my YouTube channel. When my son uttered those careless words, "Sweetheart, use mom's card. She's got about $130,000 saved," he had no idea of the storm he was about to unleash. It wasn't just about the money, it was about trust, boundaries, and respect. I had worked tirelessly for years to save that amount, setting aside every penny from a small business I built with my own hands. That money was my security, my backup plan for emergencies, and, truthfully, the product of decades of sacrifice. Hearing that my own son had handed over my card without even asking felt like a sharp stab in the heart. It was a mix of betrayal and disbelief. I had raised him to be responsible, to value integrity, to understand that respect is not measured by what you take, but by what you give. And yet, in that moment, he treated my years of effort as if they were his to spend, his to give away. I could almost picture the pride in his voice when he told his wife she could use it, as if generosity at someone else's expense was a virtue. Little did he know, life was about to teach both of them a lesson they'd never forget. My daughter-in-law didn't hesitate for a second. The moment that card touched her hands, her eyes gleamed with excitement. She took it as an open invitation to indulge herself in a fantasy she'd always dreamed of. She rushed to the mall, her heels clicking with confidence, her mind racing through all the things she had long desired but never dared to buy. The luxury stores beckoned her like a playground of temptation. Designer handbags gleamed under soft lights, rows of glittering jewelry sparkled with promise, and the scent of expensive perfumes lingered in the air like a whisper of wealth. She piled her cart high, grabbing the latest electronics, silk dresses, imported perfumes, and shoes that cost more than her month's allowance. Each swipe, each item she added, filled her with a sense of power and thrill. She felt unstoppable, imagining herself living the high life, oblivious to the truth behind that piece of plastic she held. To her, it wasn't theft or betrayal, it was simply her turn to enjoy a taste of luxury. But as she moved closer to the cashier, the weight of her decisions was already silently gathering, waiting for the right moment to reveal its consequence. The cashier, a young woman with a polite smile, began scanning the mountain of luxury items stacked on the counter. The total climbed higher with every beep, $10,000, $25,000, $50,000, until it finally stopped at an astonishing $82,000. My daughter-in-law didn't even flinch. She handed over my card with an air of entitlement, her chin slightly raised as if the entire store owed her admiration. The cashier inserted the card into the terminal, the small machine chirping as it processed the payment. My daughter-in-law stood there, already imagining the lavish compliments she'd receive when she showed off her new treasures. But then, something changed. The cashier's polite smile faded as her eyes darted to the screen. She tried again, this time pressing the buttons more carefully, glancing awkwardly at my daughter-in-law. A faint tension rippled through the line behind her. After a long pause, the cashier finally spoke, softly, almost apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card is blocked." For a moment, silence filled the space around her. The color drained from her face as she stared at the small screen in disbelief. Shoppers began whispering. She felt every pair of eyes on her, her confidence crumbling into embarrassment. She stammered, trying to explain that it must be a mistake, that her mother-in-law's card always works. But deep down, panic started to rise. What she didn't know was that I had anticipated something like this long ago, and I had already taken precautions to protect myself. At that very moment, as the cashier's words echoed, "This card is blocked," my daughter-in-law's confidence collapsed like a house of cards. Her fingers trembled, her voice faltered, and all that excitement she had worn so proudly now turned into humiliation. The people standing in line began to whisper, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. She tried to call my son, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock her phone. When he finally answered, she blurted out in panic that the card wasn't working, that everyone was staring, that she couldn't pay. My son, confused and embarrassed, hurried to the mall to fix what he thought was a minor inconvenience. When he arrived, his face went pale as he saw the cart overflowing with luxury items, things he couldn't afford in his wildest dreams. The store manager stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. My son stuttered, trying to come up with excuses, but before he could say much, his phone rang. It was me. I had received an instant alert when someone tried to use my card. My voice was calm, but beneath it was a quiet fire. I told him, If you wanted to teach your wife generosity, you should have started with your own wallet. The silence on his end was deafening. He realized then that this wasn't about money. It was about values. As they stood there, surrounded by the evidence of their greed, they finally understood that trust, once broken, can't be repaired by apologies or excuses. I arrived at the mall shortly after, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. The moment I walked in, I could see them, my son standing awkwardly beside the counter, his wife pale and trembling, and the cashier still holding the blocked card. The sight was almost surreal. I approached slowly, each step echoing with a mix of disappointment and strength. When my daughter-in-law saw me, her eyes widened in shock. She tried to mumble an apology, but the words wouldn't come out. My son lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. I took the card from the cashier, thanked her for her patience, and turned to both of them. "I didn't block the card to embarrass you," I said quietly, my voice steady but firm. "I did it to protect what took me a lifetime to build. Money can be earned again, but respect, once lost, takes years to return." My words seemed to pierce through the silence like a blade. I told them I wasn't angry about the shopping or the attempt to spend my savings. What hurt most was the betrayal, the idea that my own child thought it was acceptable to take without asking, to hand over something that wasn't his to give. Tears welled up in my son's eyes as he whispered that he didn't think it would go that far, that he only wanted to make his wife happy. I nodded slowly and replied, "If love requires stealing, it's not love. It's selfishness disguised as affection." Then I asked the cashier to return every single item back to its place. I walked out without another word, my dignity intact and my heart guarded by the lesson I had just taught. Sometimes, life gives you no choice but to let your silence speak louder than your anger. Weeks passed after that incident, and the silence in our home spoke louder than any argument ever could. My son stopped calling for a while, ashamed and uncertain of how to face me. His wife avoided family gatherings, too humiliated to meet my eyes. But I didn't hold on to bitterness. I had lived long enough to know that sometimes lessons must sting to sink in. I wanted them to understand that wealth isn't measured by how much money you can spend, but by how much respect and gratitude you carry for those who've sacrificed for you. One morning there was a knock at my door. My son stood there with his wife, both looking humble and remorseful. They apologized, genuinely this time, not for being caught, but for breaking the trust that bound us. My son said softly, "Mom, I finally understand what you meant. You didn't protect the money. You protected the meaning behind it." I smiled, because that was the moment I had been waiting for. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but it opens the door to start again, with wisdom instead of pride. From that day on, my son and his wife changed. They began saving, working, and learning to build something of their own. And as for me, I realized that sometimes love isn't about shielding your children from consequences. It's about letting them fall so they can rise with dignity.